Welcome back to Cosmic Comic Cliffs. This time we're diving into Absolute Wonder Woman number 3. In this issue, Diana faces a world-ending threat, and we're going to examine the repercussions of her past choices. To guide us through this dense material, we have an expert in all things Wonder Woman. What makes this issue so captivating?
What's fascinating here is that this issue starts with Diana already in the midst of battle with a monstrous creature. It's called the Tetracide. The creature is wreaking havoc in Gateway City. Gateway City is a modern metropolis, so that creates an interesting contrast.
I see. So right off the bat, there's action and a clash between the mythical and the modern. Can you elaborate on this Tetracide? It sounds pretty formidable.
Well, the Tetracide is capable of what's called four-killer death, meaning it consumes not just the body, but also the soul, leaving nothing behind. This concept has deep roots in Greek mythology. It taps into ancient fears about oblivion.
That's pretty terrifying. It sounds like a real challenge for Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
How does she approach this threat?
Well, she tries to reason with the military. She urges them to evacuate the city, but they don't seem to grasp the magnitude of the threat. They're dismissing her warnings. This raises an important question about how modern institutions often fail to understand or respect ancient knowledge and power.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
It seems like Diana is facing a battle on two fronts.
Yeah.
Against the Tetracide itself and against the skepticism of the modern world.
Exactly. And this is where we start to see a unique element of this story. During a battle, we notice that Diana is missing an arm. This is a major departure from traditional Wonder Woman portrayals.
Okay, let's unpack this. A missing arm. How does this tie into the narrative?
Her missing arm is a result of a past sacrifice she made. To save Steve Trevor from hell, she had to give up her dominant arm to power a spell that would send him back.
Wow, talk about commitment. That's a pretty significant sacrifice. But what about Steve Trevor? What role does he play in this issue?
We see their connection in flashbacks to the Wild Isle. The contrast between the idyllic setting and the hellish threat of the Tetracide highlights the stakes of Diana's sacrifice.
It sounds like this issue is really playing with contrasts. Ancient versus modern, love versus duty, paradise lost versus the threat of oblivion. And at the center of it all is Diana grappling with the consequences of her choices.
Precisely. And as if battling a soul-consuming monster and dealing with the consequences of a past sacrifice weren't enough, this issue introduces another intriguing element. We meet Barbara Minerva, a character who comic book fans will recognize as Wonder Woman's future arch-nemesis, Cheetah.
Wait, the cheetah is in this issue. What's her role?
She's observing Diana's battle with the Tetracide from a distance. It's a subtle introduction, but it hints at the complex and fascinating dynamic that will unfold between these two characters in the future.
So we've got a world-ending threat, a hero grappling with sacrifice, a glimpse into a future rivalry, and a clash between the ancient and the modern. It's a lot to unpack, and I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear more. Before we continue, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Cosmic Comic Clips so you don't miss out on the rest of this deep dive. We'll be back after a short message.
If we connect this to the bigger picture,
This raises an important question.
what's fascinating here is that Barbara Minerva's presence adds another layer of complexity to the story. She's not just a future villain. She represents a different way of approaching the world, one that's focused on knowledge and acquisition, perhaps even at the expense of compassion.
Okay, so we have a clash of ideologies brewing. On one hand, we have Diana driven by love and a sense of duty, willing to sacrifice her own power for the greater good. On the other, there's Barbara Minerva, who might represent a more ruthless pursuit of knowledge and power. This contrast really sets the stage for a compelling rivalry. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's go back to Diana's past. You mentioned earlier that her origin story is different in this universe. Can you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. You see, in this reimagined universe, Diana wasn't raised on Themyscira by the Amazons. Instead, she was raised in Hell by Circe.
Wow, that's a pretty drastic departure from the traditional origin story. What are the implications of this change?
It's a bold move by the writer Kelly Thompson, and it adds a fascinating layer of depth to Diana's character. Being raised in Hell, a place of eternal torment and struggle, suggests a different kind of strength, one born out of hardship and survival.
That's a really interesting point. That makes you wonder how this upbringing shaped her worldview. Did it make her more cynical, more compassionate?
That's the beauty of it. This issue doesn't give us all the answers. It leaves us with questions prompting us to consider how such a harsh environment might have shaped Diana's sense of justice, her capacity for love, her very understanding of good and evil.
It sounds like this origin story adds a whole new dimension to the character. It's not just about where she came from, but about how her past continues to influence her present choices.
Precisely. And speaking of choices, let's go back to the moment when Diana sacrifices her arm to save Steve Trevor. That act is central to understanding her character in this reimagined universe.
I agree. It's such a powerful moment. To physically give up a part of herself, a source of her power, speaks volumes about the depth of her love and her unwavering commitment to her values.
It's a testament to her willingness to prioritize compassion over personal power. This raises the question, can true strength exist without empathy?
That's a profound question, and it really gets to the heart of what makes Wonder Woman such an enduring and complex character. She's not just about physical strength, she's about inner strength, about the courage to make difficult choices and to stand by those choices, even when they come at a great personal cost.
And this brings us back to the visual element of the comic. Hayden Sherman's art style perfectly complements this darker, more introspective take on Wonder Woman. The lines are bold, the shadows deep, and the overall tone is gritty and unsettling. It's a far cry from the bright, vibrant colors often associated with more traditional Wonder Woman comics.
That's a great observation. The art style really reinforces the thematic elements of the story. It's not just about showcasing action, it's about conveying a sense of mood, a weightiness that reflects the gravity of Diana's situation and the internal struggles she's facing.
Exactly. And one particular visual element that stands out is the use of black figure style, an ancient Greek pottery technique in depicting the Tetraside's origin. This choice isn't just aesthetically pleasing, it adds a layer of historical and mythological depth to the narrative. It connects the monster to ancient fears and traditions, emphasizing the timeless nature of the threats Diana faces.
It's like the comic is drawing a parallel between the challenges of the ancient world and the challenges of the modern world. We might have advanced technology, but we still grapple with the same fundamental questions about good and evil, about sacrifice and duty, about the power of love in the face of darkness.
Precisely. And this brings us back to Diana's final statement in the issue. Love is transformative. The world could use a bit more of that. It's a simple statement, but it carries a lot of weight, especially given everything she's endured.
It's a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, even after making heartbreaking sacrifices, Diana still believes in the power of love to heal, to inspire, to change the world. And that's what makes her such a powerful and enduring figure, a beacon of hope in a world that often feels lost and cynical. But we are just getting started. What else did you find fascinating in this issue?
Well, one element often overlooked
This
is
is where it gets really interesting.
Well, one element often overlooked is the tetracide itself. Its design is fascinating.
I was just about to say the same thing. It's not just some generic monster. There's a real thoughtfulness to its visual representation.
Exactly. The tetracide is described as being capable of four-killer death. This concept, while rooted in Greek mythology, isn't something we see explored often in comics. It suggests a level of threat that goes beyond physical destruction. It's about the annihilation of the soul, the erasure of one's very being. That's a powerful concept, and it taps into some primal fears about oblivion.
It's like the tetracide embodies the ultimate fear of nothingness, right? The complete annihilation of self, and in a way that ties back to Diana's sacrifice. She was willing to face that oblivion, to risk her own soul in order to save Steve Trevor. It's a stark reminder of the stakes involved in this story.
Yeah.
We're not just talking about saving the world, we're talking about saving the very essence of what it means to be human.
That's a brilliant observation, and it makes you wonder what the tetracide represents on a symbolic level. Is it simply a force of destruction, or is it something more? Does it represent the darkness that exists within all of us, the potential for self-annihilation that we all carry?
Those are some heavy questions, and I think that's what makes this issue so compelling. It's not just about a superhero punching a monster. It's about exploring deeper themes, about the nature of good and evil, about the choices we make, and the sacrifices we're willing to endure for the things we believe in.
And it's about the power of love to transcend even the darkest of threats.
Diana's belief in love, her willingness to sacrifice everything for it, is ultimately what sets her apart from someone like Barbara Minerva. It's what makes her a hero.
That's a great point. This issue sets up a fascinating contrast between these two characters, Diana driven by love and compassion, and Barbara Minerva driven by a thirst for knowledge and power. It's a classic conflict, but in the hands of Kelly Thompson and Hayden Sherman, it feels fresh and nuanced. I'm really curious to see how their rivalry unfolds in future issues.
Me too. It has the potential to be one of the most compelling dynamics in comics, and I think the visual element will play a big role in that. We've already talked about how Hayden Sherman's art style contributes to the overall darkness and grittiness of this issue, but I think it's worth noting that their style also has a certain beauty to it, a kind of stark elegance that makes even the most brutal scenes captivating. I completely agree. The use of line work is so expressive, and the way they play with light and shadow creates a real sense of depth and texture. You can almost feel the weight of the world pressing down on Diana in some of those panels.
And yet there's also a sense of hope that shines through, especially in the scenes where Diana is with Steve Trevor. Those moments are infused with warmth and tenderness, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, love can still prevail.
It's a beautiful balance, and I think it speaks to the complexity of Diana's character. She's a warrior, yes, but she's also a woman who's capable of great love and compassion, and I think this issue does a fantastic job of showcasing both sides of her personality.
I couldn't agree more. Absolute Wonder Woman #3 is a truly remarkable comic. It's a story that challenges our expectations, pushes boundaries, and leaves us with more questions than answers. And that, I think, is the mark of truly great storytelling.
Well said. It's a comic that will stay with me for a long time, and I think it's a must-read for any fan of Wonder Woman or for anyone who appreciates a story that's both visually stunning and emotionally resonant.
Absolutely. It's a story that has something to say about the world we live in, about the choices we make, about the power of love to overcome even the darkest of threats.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into Absolute Wonder Woman #3. We've covered a lot of ground today, explored some complex themes, and analyzed the visual storytelling that makes this issue so captivating.
Mhm.
We've discussed Diana's sacrifice, her challenging origin story, the terrifying tetracide, and the seeds of a future rivalry with Barbara Minerva. But the real exploration begins now in your own reflections on this complex and compelling story. So we encourage you to pick up a copy of Absolute Wonder Woman #3 and dive into this reimagined world for yourself. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Cosmic Comic Clips for more deep dives into the worlds that fascinate you.